Hello everyone. Good evening. I welcome you all to today's session wherein we'll be covering the IPMAT Rohtak 2025 exam analysis. Just a minute, please. Yeah. Hello, Lakshmi ma'am. Sachin sir. So the three of us would be presenting the overall case before you, what exactly happened at IPMAT Rohtak 2025, which just concluded. So this is one of the major examinations that is taken by all the aspirants. The others being, for example, IPMAT Indore. So today would come as a great relief for many of us who have been preparing for these examinations to make their way into the IIMs. Hello, ma'am. I'm audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yeah. Thank you. So today we shall be, as I said, talking about the IPMAT Rohtak 2025 with all of you. So I have Lakshmi ma'am who would be taking up the VARC part.
Yes. Hi.
And Sachin sir who would be taking up the LRDA part, and I would be taking up the quant part. So let's get started. I would hand it over to Lakshmi ma'am first. Ma'am, over to you. I think we lost her. So maybe I'll just continue for some more time until she's back, until we get to the verbal section. So as we all know, the IPM Rohtak is the gateway for the prestigious course, right, that we have, the 5-year integrated program at the IIM Rohtak. So this is in line with what IIM Indore had been doing for past so many years, right? So this is just like any other IPMAT, a computer-based test. So this had, as we all know, overall 120 questions, which will give the breakup now. The overall time limit was 2 hours. There was no sectional time limit which was given. However, there is one very interesting thing that has happened in the past few weeks before the test as such. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah. So there's one very interesting thing that has happened. Here you see on the screen the number of questions from each section. Also, the overall time allotted for the section is given. Now, this time around, there was no sectional time limit. However, a few weeks before the exam, there was a notification, there was an information provided by Rohtak that there will be a sectional time limit. So, thus, many students went into the test with the idea, with the mindset that there would be sectional time limit and they will have to play accordingly. But the entire game plan, right? So I would call it as a pleasant surprise not a shock surprise as such. It was a pleasant surprise that there was no time limit and the students had the flexibility to shift from one section to the other at their will. Right? So the marking scheme that we had in the test, all right, just like the past years, was correct, you'll get +4, wrong, you'll get -1. And all the questions that we had were MCQ types. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is what I was mentioning. There was a mention of sectional time limit, which was not actually there in the test. Right? Yeah, next slide, please. Now, overall, after going through the test, few of the questions ourselves, also interacting with many of our students, what we have come down to the conclusion is, overall conclusion is, with respect to the VA section, it was found to be easy to moderate, attemptable. Many of the questions were pretty doable, right? Very rarely you saw a question which was slightly tricky, maybe in some of the previous slide, please. Previous slide, please. Yeah, just 1 minute and then I'll hand over to Lakshmi ma'am. Same thing for logical reasoning also. Lakshmi ma'am and Sachin sir will be talking a great deal about it in some time with little more information. And I would be doing the quant part as I said. Overall, the paper was easy to moderate. Right? Over to you, ma'am. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Abhishek sir. Sorry for that initial loss of connectivity. Hope you're all able to hear me now. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, coming to the verbal ability section, I will take a few minutes and then hand over to Sachin sir for the logical reasoning section. So, verbal ability section, like Abhishek sir just mentioned, the paper was not really unpredictable. There were no major surprises in any of the sections except for the absence of sectional time limit. That was the only surprise element, since it was explicitly understood that there would be sectional time limits. But yes, it came as a relief that students could spend whatever time they wanted. They could allocate the time in whatever manner they wanted to the different sections. Okay. Now, specifically coming to the verbal ability section, it was almost a replica of the previous year's I.M. Rohtak paper. IPMAT paper, almost a replica. So, let us look at the various components. Okay. From what we heard from our students in reading comprehension, IPM Rohtak has this very typical pattern of short passages with a couple of questions and then maybe one medium-sized passage. So from what we heard from our students this year also, they adhered to the same pattern. Okay, so 2 to 3 passages is what we got to hear from our students. There were 2 short passages, one on some supernova and cosmic rays, something like that. So something to do with astrophysics, physics, astronomy, etc. And there was another one on voice. Okay, how sound is produced in the human body, the whole system of the lungs, larynx, some elements of the respiratory system, auditory system, etc. So these were the 2 short passages. Okay. The questions were more or less easy. There were a couple of tricky questions as usual. Okay. In verbal ability, that is always the case. It is very difficult to distinguish between options in at least some of the questions. So that is quite predictable. But other than that, yes, reading comprehension, this is how it was. And then there was one fiction excerpt or some literary excerpt, which was a slightly longish passage with probably 3 to 4 questions. Okay. So overall in reading comprehension, 8 to 9 or 10 questions maximum. That is the usual pattern. Not very difficult, not very, very easy, because there were some moderately tricky options. Passages were easy to read. Okay, so that is about reading comprehension. Now, grammar, I'm sure those who have attended our classes and workshops know that grammar is a very, very important testing point in the verbal ability section in IPMAT Rohtak, right? So this year also, they kept to their commitment to testing grammar. Grammar had a fairly big chunk of questions, 10 to 12 questions, okay? Predictably, many of the questions were on tenses. So throughout our classes, grammar classes, we have been asking our students to focus on tenses. This is one thing that makes students tense, and the test prep, the test making people know that this is something that makes you nervous. So if you have attended our classes regularly, then the tenses questions would have been easy for you to answer. There were at least 2 to 3 questions on tenses and quite a few questions on passive active voice. Okay. Apart from this, there were the usual sentence correction questions that is an integral part of all IPM exams, right? Sentence correction, where they give you an error in a sentence and you have to correct it. Now, connectives or conjunctions. This is a unique feature. It has been a unique feature, recurrent feature of IPMAT Rohtak, where they give you a couple of connectives. Like, for example, I'm just taking an example, like maybe one question may have but, okay, another question may have therefore, a connective or conjunction like that, and then they'll give you 4 or 6 sentences. You have to decide which pairs can be connected using these connectives. Okay, so this is a very unique, this is a distinct feature of IPM Rohtak. This year also they had. Okay, then in grammar, they had error identification. Now, in error identification, the unique feature this year was that they had jumbled up sentences. Okay. A sentence was given not in the right order, but in a jumbled order. 4 parts of a sentence were given in a jumbled order. We did not have to unscramble the sentences. We just had to find the part with the error. But since it is in jumbled order, it can get a little tricky. Unless you know the right order, you will not be able to find the grammatical error. Right? So this may have been slightly tricky, but nothing very, very unusual. Grammar also was easy to moderate. Then we had vocabulary. Again, very predictable, all the usual question types, antonyms, direct questions on antonyms and synonyms, very easy according to our students' feedback. Then they had the closed test. Okay, closed test is not a regular feature of IPMAT, but it is a regular feature of several exams. At some point or the other, various exams give closed tests, and it is something which we have been teaching all through, right? Closed test is basically a short passage with 3 to 4 blanks, and for each blank, you have um, 4 options. Okay, you have 4 different options. So it is a vocabulary based test. It is a combination of fill in the blanks and reading comprehension, because you need to understand the overall idea of the passage. Otherwise, you can get confused. Okay, so that is closed test. Closed test made an appearance this time. And it seems that in closed test, they also had questions like, for some blanks, they give, say, 3 words, and one option would be both 1 and 2 can be used in this blank kind of thing. Okay, so a combination of options were also given in closed test. That looks like a slightly novel pattern or a slight variation on the typical traditional closed test model. But very easy is what our students have told us. Analogy. Analogy is again a feature of IPM Rohtak, where pairs of words are given and you need to pick from the options the pair which shows the same relationship. So, for example, lion is to jungle, otter is to what? And you have to pick from the option. Got it? So that is analogy. And then there were idioms and phrases. Okay, questions based on idioms and phrases. So the vocabulary section was very predictable and easy, not even moderate. I feel it was an easy section. Then there were also a few para jumble and para completion questions. Para jumble, the way it is given in IPM Rohtak is they give the first statement and sixth statement of the para fixed. Okay, they have it fixed. So sentence 1 and sentence 6 of a 6-sentence para would be fixed. And then the middle 4 sentences are given to you in jumbled order. You have to unscramble them. And the best thing is you have options. You have answer choices, which makes it quite easy to do, and it saves you a lot of time, right? In the exam, you can actually cheat and just look at the options and see which option matches the order the best. So that traditional pattern they maintained. And para completion is when a para is given with one sentence missing. Okay, one sentence is missing and they have 4 options for the missing sentence. So this is also based on the concept of idea flow, the same as para jumble. Okay, it's also a verbal reasoning question. So again, no surprises. Now, if you look at the time management, right, here, since there were no sectional time limits, time management would become very crucial. Now, in the verbal ability section, other than reading comprehension and the para-based questions, para jumble and para completion. So on my slide, the first point here and the last point here, other than these, grammar and vocabulary questions should not take time for a well-prepared student. When you look at it itself, you can spot the synonyms, spot the antonyms, right? And even grammatical errors are not very difficult to spot if the student is well prepared. Reading comprehension as well as para questions, para jumble and para completion. These 2 question types are time consuming relatively and also slightly tricky in terms of the options. Okay, so the good thing here was that the student could go back and forth between among the different sections also. So if the student was conscious of time management, then the verbal ability section would not have been difficult to manage at all, because in terms of difficulty level, it was easy to moderate, tending more towards easy than moderate. Okay, and I would say a good student should have attempted at least 32 questions, if not around 32 questions would be a good attempt. Okay, so that is it from the verbal section. I hand over to my colleague Sachin sir.
Thank you, Lakshmi, for a very detailed and comprehensive analysis of the verbal section. And hi, everyone, students, and hopefully you may be eager to know now the analysis part of the logical section. So, as usual, logical section had exactly the same number of questions as it was expected. That is the 40 questions. And the test item, what we call it in logic section, the test item, what we comprises of, let's say, analytical puzzles and the, like said, different types of questions related to arrangement, circular arrangement, correct, and metrics, sequence and series, verbal analogy, blood relation, direction sense, comparison, okay, and deduction. So whatever test items we generally prescribe to our students. So these all type of test items were available in the actual exams also. And students were quite comfortable while handling those questions. And with few exceptions here and there, let's say. So I will come down to all those test item one by one and just give me students' opinion as well as my opinion on those parts. So let's say this year, unlike previous year also, there wasn't any much change. So if you talk about last year's logical section, so there is a slight variation in terms of number of questions. Let's say linear equation last year might have 3, 4 questions. So this year could be there were 2, 3 questions based on linear arrangement, right? So that was the only change we can observe in terms of switching between the number of questions from one section to another, but still the whole total was same. So there could be inclusion or deletion of one test item that might have asked last year, and this year they might have not asked. So let's say we had certain test items which generally asked in critical reasoning in verbal section. So that were there might be, these sections might be present last year, but this year there wasn't any such test item available that actually directly related to verbal section, verbal critical reasoning section. So that is one thing. So purely, more or less, it was a pure logical section this year, and questions related to, let's say, 2, 3 questions that too were very easy question came up from linear arrangement. Correct. Now we generally study, or the students study, circular arrangement. So analogous to that, the same sitting arrangement was changed into hexagonal arrangement. So application of hexagonal, circular arrangement application can easily be taken in hexagonal sitting arrangement situation also. So, like say, some linear arrangement concepts can be used in any situation which is translated into tower. Some 7 towers are there, etc. So again, those same skill sets are required to do linear arrangement question can be used in doing some tower related questions also. So student might have felt something different because the way the questions are presented sometime in exam may be slightly different than the regular storytelling what is generally presented in the typical logical handout. So storytelling can be changed, but the kind of problem solving skill required to handle those questions are same. So student, those who recognize those problem solving skill properly, were able to manage all these questions very easily. So on and all, the puzzle related questions were 8 to 9, and that too all were on easier side, right? So that is one thing. Secondly, some questions related to sequence and series were there, in which question was as related to unknown number. If some numbers are given to you, some missing number may be presented, okay, in a specific sequence. It may be in some specific pattern, maybe squares of number given, cubes of numbers are given, number may be in AP or GP or some other kind of pattern. So that is generally taught regularly in the classroom. These type of questions were also presented. There were some questions presented from verbal analogy, some in the sense 2 to 3 questions I am talking about, came up from the verbal analogy also. So in discussion, during this discussion, Lakshmi also shared with us one type of verbal analogy question. This is to that. So what is other is to what? Kind of questions were there in verbal analogy also. Then this year, one set of blood relation question came up, that too in the form of symbol. There, that was not a regular direct question. So other information related to is brother of is related to theta, or is the sister of is related to phi. So these kind of question means blood relation question was asked in the form of a set. So first you had to decode those things. So coding and decoding part is generally given. So if one layer is extra introduced in the question, so generally you have to consume little more time than the regular statement based question. So that was the only hurdle in doing that blood relation related question. So otherwise it was a pretty straightforward question asked as I got inputs from the students. So this is one regular test item, blood relation, 3 questions, but was presented in the form of symbols and notations. Then there were some direct questions from direction sense. So again, these were 3, 4 questions from direction sense. So these were regular item, and generally every student, whoever it is, be they have prepared for IPMAT or be they have prepared for any other entrance, management entrance exam, BBEd, etc. So everyone goes through this preparation phase, and they were in a much better position to handle these questions. And then there were questions related to comparison. So some, let's say ABCD are given, and one is older to the other, one is younger to the other. There were 5 people. So this is a typical puzzle related questions that was asked. Again, 2-3 questions were based on that puzzle. Interestingly, some 2 test items, namely clocks and calendar, as some of the student was reporting to me, and hopefully Abhishek sir would be in a better position to tell me when he will be discussing clocks and calendar. Some students were reporting that, sir, clocks and calendar, the item which used to be asked in logic were asked in I think quant section. So how far that is true, that is will be cleared by Abhishek sir soon. So that is one thing. And the last one was the deduction. So deduction is again a typical logical ability test item, which we see across all the entrances, be it regular UG entrance test or be it any PG lit entrance test. तो deductions ऐसा item था जो पूछा गया था, जिसमें we question generally ask some A's or B's. Okay, so all Mumbaikars are Indians, all Indians are, that is to say, Australian and kind of thing. And 2 statement deductions question. Many students, I again spoke to some of the students, could not recognize these as a general deduction test item. Rather, they were asking कि सर ये इस तरह का क्वेश्चन था कि inference से related या कुछ इस तरह से. So those who were not earlier exposed to these type of direct handouts delivered in the classroom, so that was happened mostly with those students who were preparing at their own. So they had to face some issues related to that. Otherwise, जो student बराबर क्लास में आके इसको पढ़ते हैं, deductions का handout होता है, उसको ठीक से करते हैं, वो बड़ी आसानी से इस क्वेश्चन को कर पाए, बहुत ही आसानी से रिकॉग्नाइज किया. एंड दैट वाज 2-3 क्वेश्चंस दैट वर डैम इजी. So when we come to that, after doing all these basic analysis of the test item and the difficulty level of this test item, then we will come across one fact. When we summarize this, so student says, hey, I was, sir, managed to do 32 questions in this whole time. So possible this data set may also give us some idea what could be the likely predicted cutoff in this section. So soon we will talk on that part also. So that was from the logical ability side. So in nutshell, I can say it was as usual as that was appearing in the previous year, barring few basic 1 or 2 exceptions here and there. Might be in change of slightly the composition of number of questions of the test item may be shifted here or there to make the whole grand total as 40. So it is more or less regular and was very, very easy to tackle for the students. So that was from my end, and hope that will give you the fair degree idea what could be the now likely cutoff in that sections. Of course, it will be an estimate only based on the students' input. So over to you, sir, now. So
thank you so much, Sachin sir. That was quite detailed, Lakshmi ma'am and Sachin sir. So now I would be continuing with the quantitative ability overall initial impressions. So one thing that I would like to straight away start off the QA part is by telling you that the QA was mostly on the expected path. However, there was some small changes in the overall test, if you see. So people who would have taken the test, the students, they would be able to know it. As Sachin sir was also referring to it, there were some questions from quant that have appeared in LR. For example, there was a question on average speed calculation. So that's generally asked in a quant question, time, speed, distance, but that surprisingly came in the LR. And of course, there were questions on your clocks and calendars too, right? Which are also LR topics, but good amount of quant concepts being used there. Now, let's get started with the QA part. So in the QA section, the number of questions hasn't changed. As I said at the start of the session, it didn't change. So 40 questions were asked this year also. So the breakup was slightly, or I would say majorly, tilted towards the arithmetic section. So when I say arithmetic, I mean the regular RPV question, the percentage profit loss, the simple interest, compound interest, percentage profit loss, time, speed, distance, time and work, average, mixture, allocation. All these topics. So number of questions that were reported to us from various students was somewhere around 20, 25, probably more, right? Because we were not able to list down all the questions, but roughly, I would say some 60, 70% paper roughly was arithmetic, which is a lot. So this particular cue you should take for your future preparations, all right, in case you have to, all right. I hope that's not the case, but still, if you have to take the test next year, so one thing that you may definitely take away is around 60, 70% of the paper was arithmetic, which was really, really a surprise for us too. So out of all the questions, mostly were doable, as I wrote here the very first point. However, there were some questions which are reported, which were slightly lengthy. For example, there were questions on time, speed, distance, which had lengthier calculations attached to it. The question itself was not difficult, but just that a student wants to solve the question, he or she will have to go through detailed calculations. So that way, there were some 7-8 questions. There were some students who also reported questions appearing from slightly different concepts like bankers discount and all, right? So that was also something new, right? So we generally are not exposed to such terms, right? So that could be surprise for some of the students. But one thing was absolutely clear while listening to the questions from the students, that someone who is good with the fundamentals, the concepts, right, the formula, right, the rules, the theorems, etc., the basic properties, someone who is good with that would not have had any difficulty as far as the QA section is concerned, because there were so many questions where students with strong fundamentals would have found it to be very, very direct. So probably something like 30 seconds, 40 seconds questions. There were quite a few of those types, right? So for example, there was one question from simple interest, compound interest that I can recall from my interaction with one of the students, which was about is under CI, a certain amount becomes triple in 8 years. So in how many years will it become 81 times? So that's a question, standard question that is also discussed in our basic classes. So if you were part of the classes, regular to the classes, right, I am sure you would have figured out that such questions have also come and very easy to solve, right? Very, very direct. Now, one more thing that I noticed that particularly pushed up the number of attempts for many students was the fact that there was no sectional cutoff, sectional time limits, because students were going into the test with the idea that there would be sectional time limit and they will have to play in those 40 minutes. But that was not the case, and this has eventually helped in improving the number of attempts. So many of the students that I spoke to, so they were like, okay, I was done with the VARC section, whatever I could solve in around 30-32 minutes. So I was able to save some time, and they ended up utilizing that for the LR and the QA section, or vice versa. So someone who is really good at VA or let's say QA would have used that time in the VA section. So that flexibility was offered to the student this time. Now, one more thing, we'll talk about the questions and all on the next slide. But one thing that is for sure is, besides these 7-8 questions, so any attempt which is beyond 32, so 32, 34 questions types is a very good attempt. I'm assuming that when I say attempt, automatically accuracy is also attached to it. So only high attempts, of course, we all understand, will not yield results. Attempt with accuracy, because there is also concept of negative marking here, right? So we need to be careful. Now, this is roughly the breakup of the topics that appeared in our test today. All right. So as you can look at the list, there were few questions from your RPV. All right. So questions like questions on partnership. So which partner should get how much amount, what share of profit. All right. So I'm putting that under this RPV topic, the ratio topic. So there were questions like that, not very complicated. Now, when you come to PPL, percentage profit and loss, there were some very, very basic direct questions which were asked, asking you to find out X percent of A is something, some A is given, find the value of X. Some very, very basic questions like this were also asked, where students, I'm sure, would not have had any trouble. Now, in profit and loss also, the overall question level was pretty basic, all right? Very, very direct questions. Now, in SICI, the question that I was talking about, okay, under CI amount becomes 81 times in how many years? That was a very direct question. There's one more that I can recall. There was a question on simple interest. So the question told us that under simple interest, in so many years, it gave us this much interest. Under SI, it gave us this much interest. So the question was, if the rate of interest had been something else, what would be the final amount? So slightly long in calculations, I would say, but still doable. Any student who would have practiced the concepts, I think should be able to do it in around 1.5 minutes, 90 seconds. There were questions from I.M.E, good number of questions from I.M.E, average mixture allegation have also come up. TSD, there were quite a few. There were many questions on boards and streams. I think 2 questions on boards and streams were asked. Right? Overall TSD were 3 questions. Time and work were around 2 to 3 questions. Right? Very, very basic level questions again. Now in time and work, the question types that we discuss in class, basically like a tap can fill a tank in so many hours, another tap can fill it in so many hours. Together they will fill in how many hours? Now this is a 30-second question if you practiced well. So you had such gifts present here, right? In this particular test, if you had paid attention to that, easy marks, I would say. So there were some questions on calculations also, right? Questions like this 4-digit number into this 3-digit number is how much? Such basic calculation-based questions were also asked, which not very difficult, but of course, if you're not prepared on the speed maths aspects of it, time taking, right? Time taking. So this is the place where I would like to definitely impress upon the fact that there are so many things in test taking, right? So it's not only about the concept, all right, it's also about the speed of calculation, right? So this is where the basic calculation part of the questions where the speed would have played an important role, right? So we offer speed maths classes also, right? How do we do calculate quickly? How do we multiply numbers quickly? All the students who would have attended that, I hope they were benefited from such questions, right? Next, there were questions on geometry mensuration, right? Again, not very high level questions, right? Basic concepts, but sometimes the question tended to be little lengthy. That's it. Now, I would like to recall a particular question which was asked in trigonometry. So this is where revisiting the older paper helps. So there was one question which spoke of finding width of a street. There was a ladder given. The ladder, when placed on one of the walls, on one of the sides of the street, makes an angle of 60 degree. The same wall, when placed on the other wall, on the other side of the street, makes angle of 45 degree. What is width of the street? So this is a question which was asked in one of the previous years. So if someone would have solved the previous year papers also, they would have been benefited definitely. Of course, I'm not saying it's a difficult question, but what I'm only trying to hint at is there are instances where questions are being repeated not as it is, but of course we changed number, changed context. There were few questions on numbers. Now when I say numbers, what I mean by that is number series. So generally again, number series is traditionally part of the LR part. It's also covered as part of the teaching in LR, logical reasoning, but it appeared here. So basically finding the next number, some questions, where the logic was perfect squares, perfect cubes, etc. Some basic questions were asked. Questions on PNC was also asked. So there was one particular question that I recall. The question was on finding out number of people given number of handshakes that can happen. So students who know it, it's a very simple question. It's a one-step problem-solving question. So NC2 is equal to whatever number you have to find out n. So it's that direct. Questions were that direct. And in fact, this is what has pushed up the number of attempts so much across board for students, right? Probability also, the questions were on coins. There were 3 coins which were tossed. What is the probability that you'll get at least 2 heads? Such questions were also asked, right? Not new. These questions are not at all new, right? All these are old questions covered in classes, covered in previous years. Inequalities. So these questions were not the regular inequality questions. So these were questions involving symbols and notation types, right? So for example, inequalities wherein he would tell you that this particular less than is represented by some symbol dollar or something like that, right? So again, this is also traditionally a feature of LR, logical reasoning, but this time it was asked in quant. So there's no control over that. Ultimately, remember, you had 2 hours, you had 120 questions. Some LR questions tended to come in quant, some quant in LR, but ultimately it's same. You can move around. You can move from one game to the other at your will. So it's not such a big problem, I would say. It might have been a problem if there was a sectional time limit. Right now, no, I don't see any problem on account of that mixture of questions. So this is the rough breakup that we had from the QA section. Right? So in all, what I would like to share is one final glimpse of the three sections. All the three sections were not that difficult to solve. Majority of the questions were very, very direct, as Lakshmi ma'am and Sachin sir had already gave their inputs on the respective section. Quant also, I was saying the same. Most of the questions were pretty doable. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, according to the number of attempts that we have been hearing from the students and level of difficulty of the paper that we have witnessed ourselves after listening to the questions and all, we feel that the cutoffs this year would be slightly higher than the last year. So just for your information, last year the cutoff for general category I'm sharing was 301 marks. All right. So 301 marks was the cutoff. Right. And one more piece of information that would be kind of helpful in guiding your basically your positioning, right? Where do you stand, right? Kind of thing would be approximately 6% of the test takers were called for interview last year. So this year also it's more or less going to be same. So that means if I'm in the top 1,000 ranks overall, right? I'm not talking about any category as such, right? If I'm in the top 1,000 ranks, then I broadly stand a chance, right? 800 to 1,000, I most likely will be getting a call, right? So, and this year's expected cutoff, so we put it at 330 to 350. That's what we, again, remember, as Sachin sir was also saying, this is only an estimate. We're just trying to guess the work. We don't know how it will turn out. We believe it will go up, but how much we'll see. We'll wait and see. So with that, we have come to the end of the session. But before I wrap up the session, just final few points. So as you all know that we are in the test prep industry, right, for quite a lot of time, right? We have been guiding students for all kinds of examinations, be it IPMAT Rohtak, IPMAT Indore, JIPMAT, others also, right? Many other, CLAT, for example, also. So what would I like to tell you is students who have taken classes here would bear witness to this, that they would have been greatly impacted positively by going for these classes, because in our classes, I was going through all the questions that we could get hold of. And then I was asking myself, do we teach this? Do we teach this? Do we teach this in class? 99% of the problem, or probably 100% of problems, were covered in the classes. So what I'm trying to tell you is, if you're planning on taking the IPMAT 2026 next year, right, please ensure, take a call, join us, the nearest center that you have around you, right, so that you can plan your preparation in a pretty structured manner, right, not in a haphazard way, right, so that we tell you what to prepare, what not to prepare. On that note, I'll be ending the session here. Lakshmi ma'am, Sachin sir, once again, thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek sir.
Thank you, Abhishek.
Thank you.